In this video, I'd like to provide an introduction to the spinal cord. A spinal cord is a structure that begins just below the foramen magnum. I put FM for short. So just when the brainstem exits the foramen magnum, which is a hole in the cranium, we call that the spinal cord. So a spinal cord is an extension of the brainstem when the brainstem goes through the foramen magnum. And the spinal cord goes all the way down and ends at the lumbar vertebrae. It actually ends at the intervertebral disc between L1 to L2. And in infants, actually, the spinal cord ends around the level of L4. But in adults, between L1 and L2. So I put that right here. Now, the spinal cord ends in a structure that's called a conus medullaris because it looks like a cone. And I provided a diagram here at the bottom. As you can see, where the arrow is pointing, that tip, that's the conus medullaris. So the spinal cord ends there, and that's between L1 and L2 in adults, and around L4 in newborns. And just below the conus medullaris, you have the horse's tail, which is the extension that contains spinal nerves that are... I know I mentioned spinal nerves, but these are actually spinal roots that will eventually become spinal nerves as they pass through the intervertebral foramina. So the cauda equina is a collection of nerve roots that will eventually become spinal nerves of L2 through S5 as they exit the intervertebral foramina. Hope that makes sense. Now, the spinal cord is literally like an elevator. There are 31 spinal nerves that enter and exit the spinal cord. So the sensory nerves will enter and the motor nerves will exit. So you have these spinal nerves, you have 31 of them, they're going to enter and exit the spinal cord. So the spinal cord is pretty much like an elevator. And just like an elevator, it carries sensory signals up, we call those ascending signals, upstairs to the brain, and descending motor signals. So it's like an elevator that carries both motor and sensory information to and from the brain. So sensory information is going to go towards the central nervous system from the periphery, and the motor descending or output information is going to go from the central nervous system to the periphery, for example, to the muscle. So sensory signals are ascending and motor signals are descending. Okay, you can also say sensory information is incoming and motor information is outgoing. Many ways you can describe that. So that's the spinal cord. It's like an elevator. It starts just when the brainstem leaves the foramen magnum and ends at the intervertebral disc between L1 and L2 in adults, at L4 in newborns, and it ends at this special structure that's called the conus medullaris. And there's going to be 31 spinal nerve pairs that are going to come in and exit the spinal cord. Just to be clear, spinal nerves will enter and exit the spinal canal through the intervertebral foramen. But yeah, spinal nerves contain sensory information that are going to become the dorsal root that will eventually enter the spinal cord, whereas the motor axons of spinal nerves, the motor information, is going to go into the ventral roots that will eventually go into the spinal cord. So they enter and exit the spinal cord via the ventral and dorsal roots, not directly. The spinal nerves don't become the spinal cord directly. They enter the spinal canal through the intervertebral foramina, and then they become roots that are going to get inside, they're going to go into the spinal cord.